Welcome to the Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast, bringing you the country's top podcast on the subject of internet marketing.
I'm your host, Glenn Thayer, and I'm here today with Thomas Young, the CEO of Intuitive Websites. We are celebrating the 50th podcast that we've done. So, yay, 50! We've been doing this for now over 4 years. We've been having these podcasts and producing the podcasts. And I'm sure some of you are probably looking at the podcast going, no, I'm looking at the numbers. There's more than 50. What we've done with a lot of them is the content's been so rich, we've split them up. So some of the podcasts are in 2 or 3 parts and split up over everything. But the topics, we've got 50 of those free podcasts. And so celebration time. It is celebration time. And I'm really excited about this because, when we started this 4 years ago, it was actually February of 2006. We thought, this will be interesting. Let's get some content on the website and in our blog. But, here we are 4 years later. I never thought we'd get to 50 podcasts and still going strong. So we're excited about it. And we kind of wanted to celebrate. So today, or in this podcast, what we're going to do is kind of talk about podcasting. We're going to talk about our 50 podcasts, kind of what we've done in the past, why we did them, and kind of where we're going in the future. Well, one of the biggest things and the greatest things with podcasts is that people can multitask. So they can listen to it. They can have the podcast going in the background. They can drive to work. They can, as they're taking the metro to work or whatever it happens to be, throw it into their iPod, their MP3 player, listen. They can, be on hold while they're in conference calls. That's right. It's great. Yeah, they could do all of that. And people do. I know that people are doing these things and are multitasking, and it's the way that people are more productive these days, with answering emails while you're on a conference call and learning this subject while you're, answering emails, whatever you're doing. You're probably always answering emails today. But yeah, so the podcast can be multitasked, but really, we wanted to in our company, Intuitive Websites, we wanted to focus on training as a key component because there's such a big gap between what companies need to do on the web and how they need to market themselves and how they get that done. There's a huge gap, and there's a lot of really smart, intelligent people running businesses, managing companies who are really trying to understand the web and learn it, and there's no education for that. There's no college that you can go to and graduate in web marketing and get it right because it changes, every year. So we wanted to be an education firm. And even though our company has grown now, we're doing a lot of development and have dozens of clients we do marketing for, we still want to stay centered on the idea that we're education. We want to teach people so they have an understanding. And we do it without, we love to get new clients. Hey, don't get me wrong, but we do this education without any kind of consequence of getting a client in. And we don't measure the podcasting or the articles or the newsletters with new clients who are coming in. We just do it as our mission. Well, and we think it helps. Well, but the biggest thing though with that premise there is an easy client to work with is one that's educated, that already knows. And because the web is so complex, especially with search engine optimization and everything else that's going on that changes on a daily basis, if you have a client that's educated because they've listened to the podcast, then it makes it really, really simple because they can say, well, I've listened to the podcast on search engine optimization. I'm still unclear on how to do it. Can you help me with this? Absolutely. And it's also, the client has this need to get web marketing right. They all do, right? But really, we want to work with the clients that are motivated to do it right. I don't know if that makes sense. I mean, we want to work with the clients that are motivated to learn and excited to learn and open to this. Definitely don't do as much work with the do-it-yourselfers. In fact, the podcasts are great for do-it-yourselfers, and there's a lot of people out there that do that, from $50 million businesses to a mom and pop. But our focus is really on the companies that want to be collaborative, that want to learn, and want to have us be part of their team and realize, hey, these guys know what they're doing. Let's bring them in. They can supplement what we're doing in our company. So it gives us credibility, a chance to show that we really know the field. And, some people will hire us and some people won't, and that's fine. My thought is that it's just good karma. To get this information out there. Absolutely. And explain to the world what's going on. And one nice thing about the podcast is that I almost always pull the topic from what's happening with our client base. And I try to pull topics that multiple clients are talking about. In fact, one of the things I'd like to set as a goal for this year and next year is to get more
people sending topics in so that we can get a listing of what's happening in the industry. It is a changing industry. It changes literally every week. And so the needs change, and those are dynamic as well. That's one of the reasons training is so hard on the web, is because it changes so fast. So we want to stay on top of those trends, and we want to, in the podcast, we want to come up and talk about the trends, but not what we hear with our competitors a lot in podcasts is, they're very specific on high-end SEO or high-end patterns with Google and that sort of thing. I really want the focus of these podcasts to be on the bottom line for most companies. What is relevant to most companies? It's not always relevant to most companies to know that Google bought some niche, tiny little search engine somewhere, and, our competitors might be doing a 30-minute podcast on what that means for Google. No, we want to focus on, what does it mean for that business? And is there any, for the average business in the U.S., is there any relevance to the fact that Google just bought this small competitor and that sort of thing? Well, so we want to focus on relevant stuff.
But the pulling it all the way back, you talk about relevancy to small business entrepreneurs. It's simple marketing tactics.
Yeah, and when we started, if you remember, back in February of 2006, we started with a very, very basic and simple podcast. In fact, I'm looking at our website now, and we titled that podcast "Fundamentals of an Intuitive Website." Yeah, and so we started with very simple, basic concepts. And those are all there historically for you to read. And then as we get into more complex areas, when I say complex areas, I mean things that are beyond SEO, that are beyond pay-per-click and email marketing, things like content distribution and social networking, and other strategies around driving more niche traffic. All of that's going to be new areas for the podcast. And what's great about podcasting is the original 50 are still there, no matter what we do. So listeners need to go back and really start with podcast number 1. And if you can't get it on iTunes, you certainly can get it on our website, intuitivewebsites.com, under resources.
Or intuitiveblog.com.
Intuitiveblog.com, our blog as well.
Now, it's we've learned a lot over these last 50 podcasts. Obviously from utilizing different programs to record, to audio issues, and then how to set them up. There's been a lot of things that we've gone over to find out what works and what doesn't work. Yeah, the worst thing that can happen is when you finish your podcast and go back and listen, and you realize there's a hissing noise in there. Yeah, so all those things have to be, you have to figure it out. But it is, with technology today and with laptops, carrying 300 gig or whatever they carry, you can do podcasting remotely at your office with a couple microphones and a mixing board. Go right into Logic on the Mac or GarageBand even, and come out with a really nice quality product. So I really encourage our listeners to give podcasting a go. In fact, we have podcasts that are on Podcast, and we talk about the strategy behind it and what is important, what's good content that you should have in your podcast. The key thing is that every company that's doing business has a message, has a story, and that message and story can be told in many different ways and cover lots of issues. Podcasting is a great way to do that. Now, I know people have been asking how many of our clients at Intuitive Websites do podcasting.
Yeah, it's interesting. We work with quite a few clients on a monthly basis, and a lot of those clients were still working on the basics, but it's been real nice over the last few years to see a handful of clients now moving toward podcasting. SalesEffectiveness.com, one of our clients, has moved into podcasting, and I think we're going to see a lot more of it. The challenge with web marketing and the small business or medium-sized business is, where do we find the time? And it really has to do with a paradigm shift, doesn't it? Because the business owner has to see marketing differently than they used to. Marketing used to be advertising or, sales, getting on the phone, hitting the streets. Well, now marketing is more about getting your story out there, getting your message out there. And podcasting is a great way to do it. You said earlier, you can multitask, and it just is an invisible medium. You don't see the result as you're doing the podcast. But look at your stats. We have hundreds of people that listen to each individual podcast. When you add them all up, times 50, there's been tens of thousands of people that have listened to these podcasts. They're not lining up at my office door, but I know they're listening. And so that's why businesses have to realize this is a new form of marketing, but it's very effective.
Well, why should somebody podcast? Let's throw out why podcasting, why or why not podcast or to not podcast?
Well, I'd love to hear from some of the listeners or some of our clients that listen to these. Email me and say, hey, why should I podcast? My business, we do tires for automobiles. Why should we podcast? Well, what is unique about your product or service? Why are you in business? Why do you have market share? Why are you better than your competitors? What do people need to know about your product or service? We live in Colorado, and tires are super critical here. In fact, save your life. I mean, it's nice and warm and sunny today, but we could have 2 feet of snow tomorrow. Your tire's ready for that. So, I mean, that's just one example, but every business has the same example, and podcasting is a great way to get it out there. One thing we do, and I think this is important, is we don't just put the microphones up and start talking. I mean, we have an outline. We know what we're going to talk about. You need to do the same thing. You have to plan it out.
Now, what are the future plans for the Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast?
Well, I think we'll continue. And I think that really our goal is going to be to try to do 2 podcasts a month. We have had requests from listeners to try to do more, but we're actually growing, and the business grew dramatically in 2009. We're growing again in 2010. And so I'm busy running a business now. So it's been a challenge to get these podcasts going, but we're going to continue to push to do 2 a month. And I think keep the topics relevant, but also go a little deeper. I mean, I think we've covered what we need to talk about on SEO and pay-per-click. And we want to go a little deeper into website usability, conversions, and driving traffic from other sources other than just search engines.
Now, also, one thing that we want to encourage all of our listeners to continue sending in requests for special topics. If there's a certain topic, and I know our next podcast is going to be, it came from a listener.
Right. It actually came from one of our clients, and it has to do with Google News and the dissemination of press releases and company news through the web. So we're going to cover that in the next one.
Well, the folks that have been with us for all these 50 podcasts know that we end all of our podcasts with an action item plan. So for podcast, the celebratory number 50, Tom, what are the key action items?
Well, guess what it is? Go and listen to our podcasts. I mean, and take some notes and develop your own action plan. And actually be methodical about it. I know if I was going to listen to 50 podcasts, it certainly wouldn't happen in a few days. But, they're about 10 or 15 minutes each. And if you can get through one every 2 days or so, you'll eventually get through all these. You'll have a wealth of information that we've learned, all of our team members have learned over up to 10 years of doing this kind of work. So listen to our podcasts. You can find them on iTunes under Intuitive Websites in the podcast section, or on our website under resources, or on Intuitive blog. And then start your podcast channel or start your podcasting and get them put on your website or in your blog. You can also get them done. You can get an RSS feed on iTunes, and it's done for free. iTunes offers that as a free service. Over 150 or 200 million people use iTunes, so it's a big marketplace. And then, as Glenn said, contact us. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. I get about 1 or 2 emails a week from people, either asking about what we do or saying, "Hey, I like your podcast. Tell us what you'd like to hear about," and then we'll include those this year.
Well, folks, thanks for joining us, and we can't wait to have you join us on the next podcast for Podcast 51.
This has been an Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast. For more information and to see all the available podcasts and much more, visit intuitiveblog.com.